Okay, hi everyone. This semester, I've been researching social media in the age of COVID-19 and the implications it has had on cancel culture. In my first status report, I discussed the background of COVID-19 and how it very quickly shifted the way we conduct ourselves on social media. And so now for my second status report, I'm going to be diving deeper into social media influencers and their actions in the pandemic and if they faced any repercussions for their actions. So, just as a reminder, by definition, a social media influencer has access to a large audience and can persuade others by virtue of their authenticity and reach. So, to begin, I felt like it was important to draw your attention to some of the culture that surrounds influencers and kind of the guide that a lot of influencers follow. So, as like social media influencers, there's sort of a culture that allows for influencers to act in a way that warrants backlash, whether it's posting something insensitive or blatantly ignoring COVID-19 guidelines. However, pretty much despite the backlash, they still continue to retain their money, status, brand deals, and so on. So, therefore, kind of the phrase "I'm sorry" is a heavily used phrase in their vocabulary, given that influencers often need to apologize in an effort to, retain public opinion. Over the pandemic, James Charles had released this YouTube original reality show, which was called Instant Influencer. And the show was pretty much designed to put six unknown beauty influencers through some challenges to pretty much find like the next James Charles and to kind of showcase the lack of accountability that influencers put on their actions. I want to draw your attention to one challenge that was broadcasted on the show, but the challenge was pretty much to create an apology video. Um, and in the influencer sphere on social media, media backlash pretty much comes with the territory. And, apology videos allow influencers to do as they please, knowing that they can just make a video and apologize and move on as if nothing ever happened. So it's pretty much an unhealthy culture that has only been perpetuated through the pandemic. With the same challenge, James Charles also said, did an example of an apology video and uttered the words "and seen." This further kind of demonstrates how influencers who make apology videos may not even feel remorse for their actions. They feel like they just have to make empty statements to gain back public opinion, and somehow it continues to work, and we are continued to be okay with that. And it's a formula that pretty much continues to work, and especially amidst COVID-19, influencers who break guidelines and post about their actions continue to retain their following and brand deals, even though it doesn't set a good example for their large following, given their reach and influence over people. So, to further understand social media and its impact on mental health, I felt it was pretty important to provide some statistics. So, social media has many implications on mental health, including an increased risk for depression, anxiety, loneliness, self harm, and even suicidal thoughts. So, for influencers, there's a lot of pressure to act in a certain way and do the right thing, and users may presume that these overly privileged influencers simply don't deal with mental health issues like a lot of us. And TikTok influencers, I think, especially in the pandemic, fail to grasp the difference between caring for their mental health and using their mental health as an excuse to excuse their actions in the pandemic. So, one prime example of this occurred in 2020, where a group of TikTok stars, which included Charlie D'Amelio, Chase Hudson, or Little Huddy, Noah Beck, Bryant, and Maddie Monroe, took a trip to the Bahamas in order to reset given the nature of their job. And despite kind of labeling this as a mental health trip, many of them posted from the Bahamas and claimed it was safe by taking a private jet. And it just exemplifies just how influencers find themselves to be above the rules, and the Bahama kind of TikTok group deserve to take accountability for their actions, especially given that their followers consist of a youth demographic that have been most known for spreading COVID-19. It's simply just insensitive and showcases that if you have money, you're somehow immune to the pandemic and won't face repercussions. But that's a dynamic that our culture has perpetuated, and the apology video culture applies in this situation as well. And it's one thing to kind of completely disconnect from social media to promote your well-being and mental health, but it's quite a different thing to, flex your privilege and blatantly disregard COVID guidelines, which urge people not to travel. That TikTok group really didn't, they only faced backlash. They didn't get any real repercussions. No brand deals were taken away, no nothing. But there was one isolated incident that happened in August of 2020 where these two TikTokers, Bryce Hall and Blake Gray, they actually faced a repercussion for throwing major parties in Los Angeles during the pandemic and posting about it. So they were charged with misdemeanors after holding two large house parties, which were in defiance of the local health orders set by Los Angeles. And the duo pretty much pleaded not guilty to these charges, which I think only incentivizes them to want to do it again. Because if no real example is set, how are things expected to change if behavior and structure is repeated and passed on from each generation of influencers? Content keeps them relevant. So for Bryce Hall and Blake Gray, it's more of a thrill to post and get people riled up for knowing that they can just apologize and move on, because that's the culture that's become the norm for influencers. And even the influencers have showcased a pattern of repeated disregard for COVID-19 guidelines. This does demand repercussions. However, I do not believe that social media should be weaponized to further the divisiveness in our culture through actions made in the pandemic. So, in my final round of research, I do hope to discuss the implications that social media has had on college campuses. Specifically, I plan to talk about how social media has been weaponized to target students who do not follow guidelines. Additionally, how this public shaming social media environment impacts relationships and friendships. And then finally, I will hypothesize what influencer culture will look like after the pandemic ends, and if this pandemic will leave a lasting impact on how social media users will conduct themselves on social media. Thank you.